I wrote a special one for you.
Okay.
There is a moment in every investigation where the rational mind hits a wall. You have done the research. You have visited the location. You have talked to witnesses. And what you are left with does not fit neatly into any box that mainstream science has prepared for you. Most people walk away at that point. They file it under unexplained and simply just move on. Tonight's guest has spent nearly 30 years refusing to walk away. He has tracked chupacabras through Puerto Rico and Costa Rica. He has hunted vampires in Transylvania. He stood at the edge of Loch Ness, walked the roads where the beast of Bray Road has been spotted, and investigated the creature known as a Tata Duende through the remote villages of Belize and Guatemala. He has visited haunted castles, axe murderer houses, spook-like corridors, and UFO crash sites on multiple continents. And through all of it, he has held on to something rare in this field, a willingness to say, I don't know, without flinching. He holds a master's degree in psychology from the University of Wisconsin Stout, has authored over 25 books on the paranormal and supernatural, and has appeared on Discovery Channel, History Channel, and multiple William Shatner productions. He is a co-founder of Unexplained Research, LLC, and one of the most well-traveled cryptozoologists alive today. Tonight, he is our white rabbit. He has been down more rabbit holes than almost anyone on the planet, and tonight he is going to take us down a few of them. Welcome to Project White Rabbit. I'm your host, Jeremy Sosha. Now let's follow Chad Lewis. Welcome, Chad.
Wow. Well, greetings from the back roads of Wisconsin. Great to be here with you.
Oh, man, the pleasure is all mine. I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. This is honestly a dream come true. I've been following your work for the better part of 10 plus years. I kind of talked your ear off about it before the episode. I apologize to everybody. I've already fangirled enough for him today. I don't want to push him away and think I'm weird or anything like that. So, Chad, just gonna say it one more time. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is really an honor, man.
Well, thank you. And we're all building off of people who have come before us. I had the same feeling that you were talking about earlier when I first met Jerry Clark, who when I picked up early on in my research career, I picked up his Unexplained book, The Unexplained, and it just changed my world. Where, for those who don't know, his book was like an encyclopedia almost, but it was one night you might read about fairies and the next night about crop circles and then haunted places. And I thought, you can do this all? You can research all of it? And when I finally became friends with him, it was the same moment, like, wow, I just want to sit and listen to everything you can teach me. So, yeah, we're always building on everyone who's come before us.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Jerome Clark is a master in his craft. Some of the people that I've followed you working with just really, it's awe-inspiring. It really is, and you've really laid a path for a lot of the things that I do in my career and my interests, my loves, my passions, and everything. And I just want to say thank you for doing what you've done and laying the groundwork that you've done. Like you said, even if it's come after other people like Jerome Clark, I just want to thank you for what you've done, because it's really set an example for things that I want to do in life.
And thank you. That's the best part, is that I've always hoped that when I do a book or a lecture, that someone's going to say, you know what, I want to go out and dig deeper into that legend, or I want to discover this. And it happens all the time that people, I might mention a story in one chapter and, I don't know, for example, Elmwood, and then someone like you comes along and just dives the deepest into it, where it's like, great, now I can learn more about it as well.
And right off the bat, one of the subjects in the area that I really want to dive into that you've done a whole book on is Pepe, the monster Lake Pepin. And it was because of your book that it made me extremely interested in the lore and the legend there. And I've even been down to the lake and just to stand on the shores and sit and wonder what's out there. Thanks to your book, seriously.
Yeah, so Lake Pepin it's a lake on the Mississippi River and dividing Wisconsin and Minnesota. So it's kind of its own anomaly in itself. It's a lake, but it has a current running through it. And dating back to the first indigenous people talking about some giant Leviathan of the deep being in there. And steamboat captains reported seeing it. And then the white pioneers who settled permanently, they started writing about it in their newspapers. And over the years, it was forgotten until a local businessman, Larry Nielsen, the late Larry Nielsen, said, I'm going to offer $50,000 for this thing. And then it exploded where media was covering the story. And he owned a paddle boat tour group.
Yeah.
So they said, well, Larry, what happens if someone finds this sea serpent and you lose $50,000? And he said, it'd be the best $50,000 I ever spent because people would just come here. So yeah, I love the legend of Pepe, the sea monster of Lake Pepin.
It's a beautiful story. It really would bring a ton of tourism.
Yes.
So he's not wrong.
Right. And at that time, I think he owned a hotel on the lake too. So, and a lot of skeptics were pointing that out, that, well, he has a lot to gain from this legend. And I always find that interesting because skeptics will say that about any town, any community that's marketing their legend, that it's meant to bring in money. And I always say, if you found oil on your property, you wouldn't be like, I don't want to exploit that. I don't want to use that. You'd sell the oil. So
Right.
That's what these communities are doing. Two things can be happening at the same time. They can be using this legend for tourism, money in that, and then also enjoying it, keeping it alive.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, I got a ton of questions for you. I limited myself to 20.
Okay.
So, I've got a lot of the beginner questions in there too. I want my listeners, not if they're not already familiar with who you are, I'd be shocked because honestly, I do a documentary series along with Infinite Rabbit Hole and the interview series Project White Rabbit. It's called Project Jackalope, and I've covered a lot of topics where I used your books as my main source of research. The Wendigo, Pepe, the Van Meter Visitor. I mean, I've mentioned your name on this podcast. We're 280 something episodes deep, and I've probably mentioned your name in a good 30 or 40 of them. So
That's wonderful.
I would be surprised if my listeners don't know who you are at this point, but I have to treat it as if they're at Chad Lewis 101, right? So let's start off with the most basic of basics. So nearly 30 years, Chad, of chasing the unusual. Where did it all start from you? What was the moment that sent you down this road?
Great question. And I blame it on Wisconsin because I was born and raised in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And during high school, I heard about people seeing UFOs in Elmwood.
Really?
So I traveled to Elmwood, started interviewing some of these witnesses, talking to townsfolk. And then the following year, I started studying psychology at UW Stout in Menominee, which is closer to Elmwood than I am in Eau Claire.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in UFOs. That's what really got me started. And I joined the Mutual UFO Network at that time. And that's what got me interested. And then lo and behold, when I went to Stout, one of my professors, Bill Johnson, was the first UFO researcher to talk with George Wheeler, the gentleman who had the infamous sightings in Elmwood. And it would just kind of came together. I started talking with him, and he had been out of the field for a while, and that kind of got him back into it and researching. And it really went from there. I was first interested in why some people believe in all this stuff and others do not. You know, what was it about human perception or belief systems? And then during graduate school, I would present on a lot of my findings of, you know, do men and women believe in vampires different and that sort of thing. And after my lectures, people would come up and say, I need help. My home's haunted, or I saw some creature in the woods I can't explain. Could you help me investigate? So it really just went from there. You know, I didn't grow up at that time. This wasn't something you could do for a living, maybe a hobby at the very most, and if you kept it quiet and under wraps. So I didn't grow up thinking, hey, I'd like to research the unexplained. It was just kind of fate or luck or whatever that dropped me into it.
That is incredible. I feel I I feel weird saying it, but I feel blessed to be, you know, in the same area where you started and really getting my own first steps in with Elmwood as well. It's great. I don't see a lot of synchronicities and things. I'm around a lot of people who do, but I see it here, and it's great. I love it.
And it needs mentioning too that up until recently, Elmwood and the UFO days had little to do with UFOs. I mean, the name only. That when I first went to my first UFO days 20 some years ago, it was you could get a UFO burger and maybe some of the pop was named after aliens or something. But that was it. There was no talk about the history. And it wasn't until people like Bill Johnson and yourself and others that said, hey, you have this whole database of stuff. We need to really promote it for the legend is based on.
Yeah.
So that's been amazing to see.
It's incredible that the story of Elmwood isn't bigger than what it is. I was shocked when I started learning more and more about it, and the realization that there wasn't a book dedicated to this. There's a few books, including, your own, where there's a chapter or a couple paragraphs dedicated to it. But when I first went there and got I got a private tour from Amy, the president of UFO Days, around the town, and she was just talking to me. I was like, why is there not a book about this? This is insane. And then the more I dove into that book, that I was like, I could probably put out like 100-page book, something nice and tiny, and it ended up being almost 300 pages. And there's really a ton there, and yeah, it's crazy. I'm just in awe thinking about it. I really am. Anyways, back to you. I apologize.
No, because when I first went to Elmwood, I asked the same thing you did. I said, where's all the information? And someone, I think it was a pizzeria or something at the time, where they said, oh yeah, there's a couple things attached to the bulletin board, like a couple old newspaper clippings, and that was it. And I thought the same thing. I thought, this is a waste, that this story is so bizarre, so unbelievable. It needs, it could be up there rivaling Roswell type stuff.
It really can. I don't know if you've done a lot of research into it as of lately, but after Bill Cordua discovered the Rock Elm disturbance, the meteor impact from millions of years ago during the Pleistocene era, it's just been well, actually, you said that you listened to the episode I did with Dean Bertram, so you've at least got caught up on that. I don't know if you've been caught up on a lot of the finite details when it comes to the Rock Elm disturbance, but it is absolutely mind-blowing, the connection between the Rock Elm disturbance, the anomalies in the sky, and then other areas of the world that have some of the same geographical features as Elmwood. It's just mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing that it's not a big thing. Like you said, it could be holding its own with Roswell.
Right.
It could really could. All right, but back to you. So you have a master's degree in psychology. How did that training shape the way you investigate? Does it make you feel more skeptical, or does it actually make you more open?
I think a little bit of both. I always state that people ask if I believe in such and such, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but I'll say, depends on the day you ask me.
Yeah.
I always try to approach these things with, I don't know, that let's see where the research guides us. But I think having a background in psychology really helps, because a lot of what I do is witness interviews and speaking with people who have had experiences or know of legends, because most of the time when I'm talking to someone, whatever they experienced is done. It's gone.
Yeah.
I'm not there while they're seeing, you know, a chupacabra or something. So
Yeah.
interviewing them and just knowing how to avoid leading questions, or how to get them to open up or to trust you, or look for signs that maybe they are being deceitful, which is extremely rare in my experience. So those type of things play in, but a lot of time it's just dealing with people rather than the phenomena, because the people are you know, these different phenomena exist because we are here, that they're part of us, they're part of our story, what it means to us as a culture and as a people. And so a lot of the time it's just almost counseling, if you will, on some sides.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's a great point. Honestly, none of these stories exist without the people who witness them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They exist, but on the fringe of life, and they just kind of sit there in the shadows. But it's the people who witness these things that help bring them out of the shadows, and help get them into the lore that we're also obsessed with. That's awesome. You know, I never knew before I moved here and actually looked up what you were doing at Stout and everything. I didn't know that you were into psychology, and I could see it in your writing, right? Because you have a very what has been come to be known as the 50-50 stance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have a whole section of psychology books down here because I wanted to kind of understand your point of view on a lot of this, and why. One of the things that I just love so much about your work, Chad, is that exactly that you're not just saying, yeah, there's some weird stuff, I buy it hook line sinker. You know,
Yeah.
you are objective, but you're objective in a very, very scientific and thought provoking way, and I love that about your work, man.
I
Um,
remember when I got into this field, I thought, well, this is going to be easy. I'm going to solve this case. I'll figure out what's going on here. And, you know, it takes all of us a different amount of time, at least in my experience, to find that that wasn't going to happen for me. That I need to look at this as an adventure, see these legends as folklore, look deeper into them rather than discovering whether or not they're true. Because if somebody tells me they've spotted a werewolf on Bray Road or the Beast of Bray Road, you know, it's very hard to prove or disprove that, because to them, they've experienced it. So rather than looking at that, I was trying to look at it from a broader perspective, if you will. And partially it's just because I don't know. I don't know a lot of the answers to these questions. And, you know, I'm following the same trail that people have been following since the beginning of time of, are we alone in the universe? What happens when we die? Have we discovered every creature out there? And those to me are questions that are still unexplained. And sometimes I feel like I'm left with more questions than answers after all these years.
and that's such a good feeling. It really is.
Yeah.
It means that you've dug enough to, you know, you've pulled enough layers off the surface to really get to the true mystery behind a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
your books reflect that very, very well, by the way.
And I'm trying to do books for it's a debate, as you know, as an author and researcher. There's the big debate of how deep and specific do I want to get on some of this stuff, because I'm trying to reach a broad audience, you know, get it in the hands of as many people as possible. I'll give you an example. I did a book on winter legends and folklore, and one of the legends I did was on the history of the Christmas tree, and it was very
Yeah.
short. But I've got several books that are 400 pages on the history of the Christmas tree, and I love them. But at the same time, I realize 99% of the population, they don't want that. They want
Yeah.
5-6 pages summary. Give me the good stuff. So
Yeah.
that's always very difficult. Like Kevin Nelson and I did the Wendigo book, and we would have loved to have made that 3 times as big as it is, but it wouldn't have sold nearly as much or gotten the hands of people we wanted to get into the hands of.
That is such a great book, by the way. I learned so much from that book. I did.
Yeah.
Just a sidetrack kind of I don't know, give you a little story about the podcast here, Infinite Rabbit Hole. So we have our number one fan became a co-host, but before she did that, her name was her name is Kenzar, and she's from Canada. She reached out, sent us an email, telling us how great the show is, love everything you guys do. And I said, hey, why don't you come on to the show one time, be a guest, and we'll cover a topic that you want to do. And I says, whatever you want to do. And she's like, well, I really like cryptids, but what I want to do isn't necessarily a cryptid. And I was like, what is it? She's like, Wendigo. And I was like, easy day. I jumped on.
Yeah.
I jumped on the. I think I got that one off of Thrift Reads. So I do apologize. I don't think I bought that from a source that's directly from you.
Someone did.
Someone did, right?
Yep.
And I grabbed the book and I hunkered down, did a couple weeks of research with the book and a couple other sources, and we ended up doing a 2-part series on the Wendigo with our first fan guest, who ended up becoming a longtime friend of my own. I've met her in person. She came to UFO Days last year with us. And it was all because of the research on your book, man. So you've really played a big part in the building of everything I do. It's huge, man. I apologize for keep pushing that, but it's something I want to stress.
Yeah, and I love if I were to die and people remember one piece of work I've done, it's probably, I hope, the Wendigo stuff. That's the one I'm the most proud of traveling to these locations. And I've probably been to more Wendigo locations than anyone. My colleague Kevin Nelson and I have traveled to dozens of these, looking for the legend. And it was one that we were going to write a decade or at least a decade ago, but we never felt we were ready for it, that it was too big of a legend, too complex, too bizarre, that we could never do it in a book. And luckily we didn't write it back then, because when we did write it, we were much more knowledgeable about the legend. But it was one that almost didn't come to fruition because we didn't feel like we were capable of doing it, at least doing it justice.
Well, I think you guys did a great job.
Well, thank you.
And I totally understand the whole, we could have done it a decade prior, and I'm happy you did, because the book that you guys did write is just phenomenal. It really is.
Yeah, and I love that legend. It's just so bizarre, and I feel personally that I could research the Wendigo until the day I die and still know about that much of it. That the legend is so broad, and maybe if I was around 200 years ago, oh my gosh, the stories I could have collected on that. But you take what you can get.
Only imaginations, right?
Yeah,
could get you even close to what you probably could actually get. All right. So anyways, since we're kind of already on that, and we talked about your 50-50 stance already, after almost 3 decades of investigations, Chad, thousands of cases, and 25 plus books, has any topic, whether it be the Wendigo or not, moved you fully off that fence and kind of just pulled you're convinced, like, yeah, this is something that I can't have a 50-50 stance on, whether it's one way or the other?
Yeah, great question. I would say one place where I moved quite a bit is in the realm of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, the abominable snowman type, where when I first got into it, I was leaning more toward it being a flesh and blood creature, an undiscovered species roaming the woods that, much like a bear or a moose, that we were going to discover it, that it was a small amount of these. And over the last 30 years, just talking to so many witnesses who reported doing weird things of, vanishing before their eyes, or being reported before, during, or after UFO encounters and weird supernatural stuff, that I'm leaning now in the camp of that it probably is something other. And I don't know what that other is, but I don't believe it's here on the planet like a bear is, year round, 24/7. It's flesh and blood. It might be flesh and blood, but again, not here the way a bear is. So that's where I've moved a bit, definitely. And I know that's hotly debated in the Bigfoot world,
It
but
very much
based
is.
on my research, And again, who knows? It could be A, B, or none of the above.
Yeah.
And it could be we don't even know the right questions to ask, much less the answers to those questions. So I've moved quite a bit there, but I think the biggest move in my 30 years is, again, moving from trying to solve a lot of these things to seeing the adventure of it. Because many people who started researching when I did, they got burned out very quickly because they would go to all these places and usually nothing happened, whether it was a haunted place or a UFO hotspot or what. And they kind of got burned out over and over, where early on, I tried to see the adventure of it, that going to these places, hitting roadside attractions along the way, interviewing people, and enjoying the legend itself. And I think that's what's kept me motivated for so many years in this field, is that not knowing, but seeing it as an adventure.
Yeah. Speaking of the non-scientific name of it, at least, the Woo Bigfoot.
Yes. Yes.
I like to drop book recommendations for people, which I've done multiple times with books of your own. There is a book, I believe it's called Where the Footprints End.
Mm-hmm.
I have it. I just don't know where it is. I was gonna. Oh, right there. Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner, Where the
Yes.
Footprints End, Volume 1 and 2. If anybody's interested in the whole concept of the Woo Bigfoot and from every point of view, whether it be mind speak or multidimensional travel, also just spiritual and even extraterrestrial in a sense. It's a 2-volume series, and they're phenomenally written and well researched. And then also a good friend of ours here on the show, Carter Bushard, has done a 3-part series on a similar. It's more of actual investigations into the Mindspeak Bigfoot. It's called Evidence of an Enigma. I highly recommend his books as well, parts 1, 2, and 3. Sorry, I like
Nope.
I'm a huge reader, and I like to recommend things for listeners to read. So by any means, if you have anything to plug to, like Jerome Clark's Unexplained or anything, throw it out there. My listeners love it.
Well, I would echo Cutchin and Renner's books, the 2 volumes, that anyone reading those is at least going to be more open to the possibility that these things are something other than even the most diehard flesh and blood camp. Reading those 2 volumes, you're at least going to explore the possibility of it. They're fantastic work.
They are. They're amazing books. All right, so what does a Chad Lewis investigation actually look like? I mean, from start to finish, if you can just briefly go through it, walk us through your approach to a brand new case.
Sure. And it changes, because today it's a lot different than it was 30 years ago, because when I was working on my first book with a colleague of mine, Terry Fisk, about haunted places in Wisconsin, we would go to these places and we were able to spend a few days at each place. And now that I don't have the luxury of that. So just the other day, I discovered a new legend. I was doing some research on the origin of Paul Bunyan, and happened to discover this story out of the Northwoods of a ghostly lantern-carrying phantom, that he was a trained conductor or engineer, and this is in the late 1800s, and he was killed in a accident along the rail lines, and the newspaper just had a tiny little blurb about that. Now his spirit waves his lantern at the hour of his death every night, and you can see it. So that's all I had. So I happened to be going up to that area, and I tried to dig up as much as I could about that using newspaper archives now. It's so easy with all the, newspapers.com and newspaperarchives.com.
Yeah.
Seeing if anyone used the name, what be it, and I couldn't find anything. So then you reach out, at least in my experience, I reach out to historical societies, local newspapers, to see if they're familiar with the legend. And oftentimes they're not, because it's very obscure and a long time ago. So then I actually went to the location to try to find where this train crash might have occurred. And So that gives you a kind of how it plays out. It plays out with starting out, maybe someone tells me about a legend. I start digging up as much as I can, and then I go there and try to dig up on site, interview people, talk to locals, talk to the historical society, visit the local libraries. Years ago, libraries would all keep a vertical file, they were called, of pamphlets and folders of legends. So if they had a local legend of, I don't know, a house with a cursed doll in it, every time that local newspaper would do something about it or someone would write up a report, they'd just throw it right in their vertical file. So you could come in and say, hey, do you know anything about the haunted house? And they'd say, right here, and to pull it out. And often those things still exist at historical societies and libraries to this day. So for me, at least, there's nothing better than being on site. That not only to dig up stuff that you're not going to find in books or online, but also to get a feel of the legend. Why are people seeing a lantern moving about? Is there any logical explanation? Or what do the townsfolk think of this legend? Do they know about it? And one of my favorite things ever is talking to seniors in the area, old timers.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you a version of a legend. And then you talk to some college age kids and they have a completely different version of the same legend.
Yeah.
You know, the telephone game has passed decade after decade, and I love seeing how these legends morph and progress.
Yeah. That's crazy. I've also recognized that with Elmwood.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. Well, speaking of, I want to move into the Midwest. We have a huge listener base here in the Midwest, in Wisconsin. So you grew up in Eau Claire, you studied in Menominee. What is it about Wisconsin and the Midwest that makes it such a hotbed for high strangeness? What do you think?
I think it's a combination of people, the land, the environment, the culture. And what I mean by that is that there could be a lot of legends happening in other states, but people aren't as comfortable talking about it as they are here in the Midwest, or that no one's there to record these legends and stories. And then there's something I think about the land itself, the environment. We have the driftless area in Wisconsin where the glaciers mist.
Yep.
We have every environment you can think of, from heavily forested areas to some prairies, to wetlands, to farmland. So we have all these different areas where legends can make themselves known. We have tons of water because most of the non-indigenous legends that came here came from, immigrants coming over, and they settled near water for survival. So they would bring their stories with them and create new stories and legends. So we have plenty of that as well. So I think there's something special about the Midwest in the fact that it's the people and the place itself. There's just something mysterious about it.
Love it. Beast of Bray Road is one of Wisconsin's most iconic cryptid cases. And I just want to take a second to recognize Linda Godfrey. May she rest in peace. I've also mentioned her multiple times on the show, and I cannot recommend any of her works more. Anything that you can find on Linda Godfrey or written by Linda Godfrey, buy it. She was such an amazing voice. But speaking about the Beast of Bray Road, what is your read on what people are actually encountering there?
Great question. And one, there's probably no other legend that's attached to someone outside of maybe John Keel and the Mothman story that the Beast of Bray Road is attached to Linda Godfrey.
Yes.
Without her, it might have been another decade or two before we heard about it, if at all. And it certainly wouldn't have gained the notoriety it has without her research. And for those listeners who don't know, and viewers, that in the late 1980s in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, Linda was working as a journalist, started hearing about people traveling down a small stretch of road about 4.5 miles long called Bray Road. And there they started seeing, for a lack of a better term, a werewolf. Anywhere from 5 to 8 feet tall, the long muzzle, the thick matted down fur, Sometimes it was seen as a biped running upright on its hind legs like you and I do. Sometimes it was down on all fours. Sometimes it looked half human, half wolf. Sometimes it was something out of a Hollywood horror movie. Sometimes it would charge vehicles and try to scare people. Other times it seemed more likely to scurry back into the underbrush and try to remain undetected. Sometimes people saw it eating roadkill or freshly killed prey on the side of the road. And I met Linda right as she was doing the research into the book for the Beast of Bray Road, before Linda and I, either of us had a book out. And she gave me a tour of Bray Road, and yeah, terrific. Beast of Bray Road. I mean, any of Linda's books are fantastic, but that one's particularly good. And I don't want to speak for Linda because she's not here, but toward the end of her life, she was leaning more toward that there's something supernatural about the legend.
Yeah.
Again, because people were seeing it, but I mean, Bray Road it's rural, but it's not, you're out in the middle of the desert rural. Right. There are farms, there are cars, people driving. If you go park on the road, it won't be 5 minutes before someone drives by you. It's pretty heavily used still. So it's not that there's hundreds of square miles of this creature to live undetected. So she was starting to come to the conclusion that there had to be something else. And a lot of people out there believe it's some sort of portal. A lot of the local landowners believe that this thing or things are coming through some sort of portal. That's why we've never captured it or found a body or any of that, because it's not there in the same way. And, I'm just amazed because every time I think I have a theory on the Beast of Bray Road, I uncover other sightings or encounters that put me right back to square one, where, I thought it was aggressive for a while. And then you hear people saying, it seemed like it ran away, as afraid of me as I was of it, type thing. And that, someone reported that it was, it looked like more of a man-like thing with maybe 150 pounds. And then others say it was heavily muscled and that it was 300 pounds. So I don't know if these people are seeing the same thing or just from a different angle or maybe a different perspective, or maybe these things appear different to you than they would to me.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I just wanted to build on that. And, just if anybody's ever done the research or read one of Linda's books, specifically the one on the Beast of Bray Road, she dives heavily into, or there's a part that's dedicated to the connection between this beast and the burial mounds that are in the area too. And just taking research from outside sources as well, mainly the research that's been done in properties like Skinwalker Ranch by Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, James Lakatsky, and their research into these middle ground areas between territories of Native Americans. I mean, there's so many areas. It's like a lattice pattern throughout Wisconsin and the Midwest, where all of these areas that are considered buffer zones between Native American lands were known to be hotbeds for some of the most strangest paranormal activity that you can think of. And Elkhorn literally sits on one of those lines. So I think she was on the right path. I think you're on the right path too. Is there an answer that we can give that's 100%? Probably not. But I think that if we're not looking from all points of views, we're not looking at anything.
Yeah, so. I agree. And when I first started out, if let's say you had a carload of people that saw a UFO, and the correct and research way was to separate them, have them all write down and draw whatever they could remember separately from one another. And that if they all kind of drew the same thing, that gave it more credibility. And now I found that completely different 30 years later, that I can have 4 witnesses that are seeing completely different things, that they're all looking at the same thing, but for one, it appears to be a certain color or a different height or a different shape that, years ago you would have tossed that out and said, well, they're all making it up, that their stories can't even align. Where now I think I'm at the point where if it is off kilter a bit, that's even more credible to me because I realize that people do experience these things differently.
There's so much research into even mundane things where perspective is a big it's an influencer on what people see and how I hate to call it a meme, but that's pretty much what it is, right? The famous perspective meme of the 6 or a 9 just depends on where you're standing. I think it's very important to have that mindset and understand that even though people are reporting different descriptions, just like in the Beast of Bray Road, or like you said with UFO sightings, I think it was John Fuller's work on the Exeter incident, uh, New Hampshire, 1965, I believe it was, where I can't remember the kid's name. Oh, Muscarello. And some of the people that were reporting what was being seen in that area, they were even Muscarello and the officer that witnessed the same red light. They both described it differently, even though they were standing right next to each other. Absolutely incredible. It's very important about the whole perspective thing.
I agree 100%. And it just adds another layer of weirdness that makes it even harder to get to the truth of what's actually happening. And it throws in that whole trickster element of, is there some cosmic trickster at play here that as soon as you're getting close, well, let's throw a little detour.
Yes. The cosmic trickster. Gotta love the cosmic trickster theory. There's a lot of work there. I mean, John Keel was very adamant in his concepts of an outside source playing with our minds. I think there's a lot of weight to that. So, getting back to the Midwest, the Hodag, Peppy, Van Meter Visitor, these are all things that you've been around, worked around. Are there any regional cryptids around here that you think deserve more national attention than what they get?
I'm sorry, I lost you for a minute. Are there any regional cryptids something?
Yes, sorry, internet's kind of being a little funky here. Are there any regional cryptids in the area, Midwest or Wisconsin, that you think deserve more national attention?
I certainly, I think the Hodag is magnificent because obviously it was a hoax, but in terms of cryptids, it's one of the oldest in America. The Jersey Devil predates it and a lot of ghost stories and that, but like for its own name and its own brand dating back to the 1800s, it outlives a lot of cryptid stories. But I also think Thunderbirds as well. And maybe it's because of our indigenous heritage here in the Midwest of all the native tribes that have come here talking about the Thunderbird. But when you hear stories of the Thunderbird, these gigantic birds that received the name because when they flapped their wings, it sounded like thunder, and they often would be associated with lightning and thunderstorms, and sometimes were thought to be these harbingers of ill fate or bad things to come. They don't get enough attention, and I think partly it's because people think, well, that was a couple hundred years ago. Superstitions from a long time, we don't believe that anymore. Other stories have taken the place of that. But when you look at some of the Thunderbird sightings all the way through modern day accounts, it's truly amazing that there might be these things flying about in our sky.
Yeah. I love the Thunderbird stories. I think that the what was the name of that species? The Argentavis, I think is a very good possible culprit for something that stayed around a lot longer than anybody expected it would. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few Argentavis either. I'd be surprised if they were still around now, but that they weren't around leading into the 20th century, at least.
And we have a ton of hellhound stories in the Midwest as well that I think
do.
Yeah, don't get a lot of attention. And, these devil dog stories these spectral hounds that people don't know about outside of the Midwest. I think we for some reason, are a hotbed of these creatures.
That's a good one because there really isn't somebody. Well, okay, I could be wrong here, but I want to say that there really hasn't been anybody that has really dedicated a lot of time to. I mean, shoot, just the American hellhound or black dog. I mean, I know there's been a ton of work, like in the UK and other areas, even South America.
Mm-hmm.
The black dog phenomenon is a worldwide phenomenon. But you're right. There's incredible stories of it right here in the Midwest. I would love to see somebody pick up that mantle.
My colleague Kevin Lee Nelson's finishing a book on American hellhounds.
Is he?
Yes.
All right.
So,
That's
because
awesome.
same thing, because if you want to know about the black shuck over in Europe, great. There's book after book after book on it. And as you said, if you want to learn about the cadeos of Central and South America, same thing.
Yeah.
But if you want American hellhound stories, well, you're on your own until Kevin's book comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only strong hellhound story I think is the Dueo out of Maryland, and I think that the only person that really did anything on that, what was her name? Madeline. Oh man, what was her name? It's gonna drive me nuts. I'll think about it. But I do want to take the time to recommend another book to anybody that's interested in the UK Black Dog. This is by Mark Norman, Black Dog Folklore. This book is absolutely phenomenal. I paid way too much for it because they don't sell it here in the United States. but it's absolutely a great book, and I cannot wait for that. You said Kevin Nelson's doing that?
Yeah. One of my colleagues that I wrote several books with, and Mark Norman has a fantastic Scooby-Doo in the paranormal book too.
Does he really?
If you like Scooby-Doo and how folklore, the folklore behind the Scooby-Doo franchise.
That's phenomenal. I should definitely pick that up. But no, you've worked with Nelson and Voss on a lot of projects. Let's kind of sidetrack into that. Where did you meet them? And because you guys have you've collabed on a lot of projects with them.
Yes, it was maybe 20 plus years ago. We all happened to meet at a conference that was being held in Wisconsin called Ghostapalooza.
Ooh.
And the three of us were just there as audience members. It was in Wausau, Wisconsin, and we kind of knew the event organizers. And we just all started talking and had the same outlook on these legends in the same way of let's do it back roads, let's do it gritty, let's badass it. Really dig into these things because at the time, a lot, and not discounting how people do their research, that's great, but there were a few books about ghosts where the authors just kind of asked newspapers for the readers to write in about stories and then published them. And it was always like a haunted barn house somewhere in this county. And it never gave a specific, like, I want to go there and check it out. So we kind of all had the same idea of how we wanted to research things. And it just kind of blossomed from there. We're all living in Wisconsin at the time. And just had the same way of doing things.
That's awesome. You guys have created some amazing work together. You really you have.
I'm moving around a bit because for some reason, this is so bizarre. My camera to me is showing me like bright red.
Ooh.
So, yeah. So I'm moving around to see if it's the light or what, but hopefully it won't come out that way. But it's probably that cosmic trickster again.
Maybe. Yeah. We do have we have a habit. I mean, we talk about a lot of things, right? I am a huge fan of cryptozoology, huge fan of many of the same subjects that you talk about, but we talk about anything under the unexplained umbrella, and sometimes it goes into the government conspiracy side of things, and it just there's this funny little thing that happens that whenever we start talking about some really deep government conspiracy things like UFOs or talking about what were we just talking? I was just talking with somebody about something. I can't remember, but we lose internet connection. Everything gets fuzzy, colors invert. It's very, very odd. But no, you look fine on this end to me, at
Oh,
least.
good. And researchers were doing that before. I mean, I talked to old time researchers who were saying we used to interview people on the phone back in the day, and same thing, weird clicks, odd noises, voices on the phone, weird interference.
Yeah.
And now it's just the modern day equivalent of that.
John Keel recorded a lot of that in his books. I've talked about John Keel ad nauseum on this podcast. My listeners, I've got a couple listeners that have purchased the entire John Keel collection because of me.
You need to have Steve Ward on your show. You guys could talk about Keel until the sun comes up.
I would love to have Steve Ward on the show. I would love to have Voss and Nelson on the show too. I mean, Chad, you could really be a gateway drug to a lot of really cool interviews that I would just, love to have, man. But we could talk about that off the line. Let's stick to you. Let's go international here for a minute. So you've tracked cryptids, paranormal phenomenon on nearly every continent. What is the single most unsettling investigation you have ever been on?
Oh, quite a few. And I always joke that when people ask, do you ever get scared at these locations? And I kind of joke back that if you're not getting scared, you're not trying hard at a lot of these places because they're just downright creepy. One that really stands out to me is I was in Central America. I was looking for the Tata Duende, this tiny little forest protector guy with a machete and a sombrero, and he has no thumbs, so if you don't tuck your thumbs in, he'll come and rip them off. And a fantastic legend of the forest, a forest protector. But they also, La Llorona was pretty popular down there, and here in America, she's a woman who usually killed her children, and now she wanders the riverbanks crying out for their souls and their spirits. But down there, they had a version of Llorona appearing in the woods as a beautiful woman at night, and she would lure men into the woods, and then she'd turn into a giant snake-like creature and devour them. So, but the only way to get along the riverbanks was to take this midnight crocodile tour, where you're in a canoe at night going down the river in this infested, crocodile-infested waters. And it was flooded out, so we had to wade, up to our thighs in the river to get into the canoe. And all we had was a little miner lamp, and it was so creepy. I said to the person, we were staying at a monkey sanctuary in the middle of nowhere. I said, awesome. Hey, if you're too scared and you don't want to do this, just let me know. I won't hold it against you. We can go back, hoping that they'd say, yeah, let's get the heck out of here. And I can tell you that entire evening, I was just white knuckled on my paddle. I don't know if I was more afraid of the creatures in the water or La Llorona, who we didn't encounter, but that was one of the most terrifying ones I've done, because the environment, that not only did you have the supernatural dangers, you had the real dangers of a known animal that could rip you apart. And I don't know, today I'd like to think I'd still do it, but it'd still be as frightening as it was 20 years ago.
We covered La Llorona. We had a guest, his name was George on, and he had this incredible recording from a CCTV on his property where he lived in Mexico. And these god-awful screams just rang out, and it just sitting here in the chair that I'm in right now, playing it for everyone listening, gave me goosebumps. And talking to him. But yeah, just another time to drop another book. Judith Beatty came out with a book called La Llorona. In fact, there is a story in here about the Serpentine version. Highly recommend that book if anybody is interested. Very, very interesting story or legend the La Llorona is, and it's one I would say that a lot of the Latin American countries take it extremely serious. And even some of the southwestern states here in the United States take it extremely serious too. It's the Bigfoot is probably the big legend around here in the United States and Canada, right? Where you would say per capita people believe. But as you start heading south and getting into the Latin America side of things, La Llorona takes over. It's incredible.
And I highly recommend, obviously there's enough legends in America for you to investigate forever and never run out. But if you do have the means and the chance to get overseas or to other countries, just to see how serious some of them take the legends, where I can't tell you how many times I've inquired about a legend and the locals say, "What are you doing? We stay away from these things. Why are you looking to go after them? The crazy American, what are you doing?" So I love that, where they take it with a much more serious tone than here in America, where even our Bigfoot is on, beef jerky packages and that.
um, so let's get into Stan Gordon's side of things. You've investigated UFO crash sites from Roswell to Kecksburg to the Aztec site. Do you think the cryptid phenomenon and the UAP phenomenon are connected? I know we kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but let's expand onto that. Do you think that they're completely separate conversations, or do you think that there's a place for them to come together?
I've done lectures on looking at UFOs and cryptids, looking at possible correlations. And I'm fascinated by them because there are so many stories of people seeing a UFO before, directly, or after a cryptid encounter, or vice versa. Or that I think there has to be something to them. That coincidence alone makes it seem very odd that that would just happen. Whether you're seeing things on board, like Joe Simonton in Eagle River, Wisconsin, who saw creatures on board making pancakes that he swapped. To seeing cryptids nearby were UFOs. And I found this to be quite enlightening for me early on, that I would start going to a place and ask about the certain legend. And in the beginning, that's all I would talk about. I would ask them, "Have you heard this local legend?" And if they said no, they'd move on to someone else. And I learned very quickly that start asking about any legend. So if you ask someone if they know about the haunted house on the outskirts of town and they don't, they're going to say no, and that's the end of the conversation. But if you say, "Do you know of any odd legends of the area?" they might think, "Well, I don't know about that one, but yeah, do you know about the sewer monkey down there?" or something like that. So I'm trying to expand it because I'm looking at the entire spectrum, the whole realm of the paranormal, whether it seems related or isn't. Maybe we just can't piece it together right now, but I firmly believe that they're somehow connected. What that connection is, no idea.
It's very reminiscent of John Keel's window theory.
Yes.
Very, very reminiscent of it. I have nowhere near the resume as you do, and I've seen the correspondence between cryptids and UFOs, and it's just incredible. All right. I was gonna plug Stan Gordon, but I've done him enough. Silent Invasion, everybody. I know that there's been a couple episodes where I've mentioned his book, but Silent Invasion by Stan Gordon talks specifically about like Chestnut Ridge and the connection between UFOs and Bigfoot from the state of Pennsylvania. All right, I know we're ticking up on the hour now, so I want to kind of squeeze in a few more. Sorry if I'm rushing you at all.
No, perfect.
Let's jump right into the end cap here. Chad, thank you so much, man. What are you working on right now, and where can people find your books and follow your work?
Right now I'm working on a Supernatural Lake Michigan book. My previous book was Supernatural Lake Superior. So now I'm doing the Michigan side of it. And Heck, talking about window areas, these lakes are, I mean, you have stories of sea serpents, ghost ships, haunted, cursed areas, mermaids, UFOs, you name it. These are the portals or window areas. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I always say, if you want to find me, go to the weirdest legend you can think about, drive out there, and that's probably where you'll find me.
Gotta love that. Here, I'll go ahead and share the image of
Yes.
your Supernatural Lake Michigan book. Is this out or is this coming out?
It will be out in September, and the cover was done by Sean Engelman from Creepy Acres fame.
Oh, wow.
So another
really
one
cool.
you should probably have on.
I would love to talk to Sean. I love his
stuff. He'll be
stuff.
at the Van Meter Visitor Festival this year speaking one of our keynotes with Joshua Cutchin, and will be there as well. So yeah,
Really?
this is full circle. Yeah.
Maybe when is the Van Meter Visitor?
It's always
festival?
the last Saturday in September. So this year it's the 26th of September, because that's the anniversary. The sightings all happened in the last few days of September 1903.
I wonder if I can make that happen this year. That sounds like something I need to add to the calendar.
It's really fun because we have speakers there, but also walking tours to the town is 900 people, 2-block downtown. So you walk right into the bank where the previous manager shot out the window of the bank shooting at the Van Meter Visitor in 1903. So it's really cool because you feel like you've stepped back into history.
Let's see. Yep, there you go. That is your website right there.
Yeah, you can pre-order it. Obviously, signed copies if you want to devalue your book, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. ChadLewisResearch.com. And looks like we have some quick links to socials, the gauntlet of different tabs that we can open up. Oh, man. It's going to, oh, yeah. I have a lot of these. I have a lot of these.
And if you want to see where I'm going to be presenting, I do hundreds of lectures, most of them free throughout the U.S., where you can see where I'm going to be in your neck of the woods. Or if you have a story you want to tell me or a legend you want to talk about, contact me as well.
I don't have this yet. This Lumberjack Creatures of the Northwoods. So I'll have to try to find that. Or
your beloved jackalopes in there.
Is it?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if you could see them.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I've got a thing for the jackalope.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Yeah, cool. Very, very cool. All right. Chad, did I miss anything? Anything at all?
Anything we missed, we'll catch up in part 2 down the road.
I would love it. I think I made it through half the questions I had for you. And I cut that down from probably 120. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do the outro, Chad. If you don't mind hanging out when I hit stop, just to make sure everything gets uploaded, and I'll have you out of here shortly.
Great.
All right. That is Chad Lewis, everyone. Nearly 30 years on the back roads of the world. 25 plus books and a 50-50 stance that somehow feels more honest than most people's certainty. What I love about tonight's conversation is that Chad does not need you to believe anything specific. He needs you to stay curious, to keep asking, to resist the urge to file the unexplained away just because it makes you uncomfortable. That is exactly what a white rabbit does. He does not hand you conclusions. He hands you a map of everywhere he has been and lets you decide where to go next. Chad's books and links are in the description. If you are in the Midwest, chances are there is a haunted road or a cryptid legend in your own backyard that he has already written about. Go find it. This has been Project White Rabbit, Episode 3. I'm Jeremy Sosha. Thank you for joining me and tonight's guest, Chad Lewis. Good night, everyone. Bye. Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. If you're looking for more of our stuff, head on over to infiniterabbithole.com, where you can find links to all the podcast players that we are available on, and even our video platforms such as TikTok and YouTube. While you're there, make sure to check out all the links for our socials and hit that follow so you know when all the new stuff from our podcast comes out. And until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here in the next fork in the path of the infinite rabbit hole. Bye.